They were the couple America couldn't stop watching. Lee Majors, the rugged action hero who defined masculinity on primetime, and Farrah Fawcett, the radiant beauty whose smile could sell a million posters with ease. Together, they weren't just famous, they were the very picture of Hollywood perfection. To fans, their marriage looked like proof that fairy tales could be real, even under the relentless spotlight of Los Angeles. But that's the trick of photographs. They only tell the part of the story you're allowed to see. Behind the magazine covers and red carpet smiles, life was much quieter and far less glamorous. Nights ended in silence rather than conversation. Long workdays left no energy for closeness, and the home that was supposed to be a refuge often felt more like another stage. The world applauded the couple. Inside their own walls, they were already drifting apart. Lee Majors was grounded, disciplined, and deeply traditional. He believed marriage was a commitment built to withstand everything, even the chaos of Hollywood. Farrah, though, thrived on energy, laughter, and independence. Her personality was magnetic, but it also clashed with the slower rhythm Lee craved. To outsiders, these differences looked like balance: the strong, steady husband and the vibrant, playful wife. In private, those same differences became the first signs of strain. The irony is that the qualities that made them America's dream couple were the very things that chipped away at their foundation. Lee's stoicism, which looked heroic on scene, could feel distant at home. Farrah's charm, which enchanted millions, left her constantly in demand and rarely available. Together, they were living a contradiction, adored by millions, yet struggling to stay connected to the one person who mattered most. And this is where their story begins, not in scandal or betrayal, but in the slow erosion of intimacy that fame has a way of magnifying. While fans were still buying into the dream, cracks were already spreading across the marriage, small enough to hide from the world, but deep enough that they would never fully close again. Lee Majors didn't just step into Hollywood, he bulldozed his way in. From his breakout role in The Big Valley, he quickly carved a reputation as the strong, silent type who could hold a scene with little more than a glance. Casting directors loved his rugged presence, and audiences responded with loyalty. But it was the $6 million man that turned him from a working actor into a cultural phenomenon. Overnight, he wasn't just a character, he was a brand. Kids mimicked his slow-motion fight scenes in schoolyards. Toys flew off shelves, and his face became as recognizable as any rock star of the era. What made Lee so magnetic was that he didn't seem to be acting a role. He embodied it. He projected strength, resilience, and quiet confidence, qualities that viewers longed for in an uncertain decade. Every network wanted their own version of him, but there was only one Lee Majors. That kind of fame comes with power, but it also comes with pressure. Suddenly, he wasn't just Harvey Lee Yeary from Kentucky. He was called Steve Austin, the indestructible man expected to stay indestructible both on and off the screen. Farrah Fawcett's rise was very different, but just as unstoppable. She didn't arrive with the force of an action hero. She slipped in like sunshine, warming every room she entered. First, it was commercials, like her iconic shampoo ads, where her golden hair seemed to glow under the lights. Then came print modeling, where photographers couldn't get enough of her easy smile and approachable beauty. She didn't have to try to be glamorous, she simply was. And in Hollywood, where it is the most valuable currency, Farrah had it in spades. Her charm wasn't just visual, it was emotional. She had the rare ability to make audiences feel like she was smiling directly at them, whether on a television screen or a magazine page. That connection, that feeling of closeness with a stranger, was what set her apart from countless other models and actresses vying for attention. Producers noticed, agents noticed. Soon, she wasn't just another hopeful in Los Angeles, she was a rising star who seemed destined for something bigger than commercials and supporting roles. By the time Lee and Farrah crossed paths, both were climbing fast. He was already a household name, the action star every boy wanted to be. She was a Texas beauty queen, turned model, with Hollywood at her feet. Their careers were different in tone, but identical in trajectory. Up, up, and higher still. And when two meteors rise at the same time, the collision can either create something dazzling or something devastating. In 1973, Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett stood at the altar and promised each other forever. To the outside world, it looked like the perfect pairing, Hollywood's strong, stoic action star marrying the radiant beauty on the brink of fame. For a brief moment, their lives aligned in harmony. They were young, deeply in love, and convinced that whatever challenges came with stardom, their marriage would be strong enough to weather it. But Hollywood isn't built for harmony. It's built for momentum. Lee's career was already running at full speed. The $6 million man demanded grueling hours, long nights on set, and endless press tours. At the same time, Farrah was hustling from audition to audition, taking modeling jobs, commercials, and small acting roles that could open the next big door. Their calendars stopped looking like a shared life and started looking like two parallel schedules that almost never touched. At first, it was easy to brush aside. This is temporary, they told themselves. Once this project ends, we'll slow down. But projects in Hollywood don't end. They lead to more projects. The call sheet that eats one week eats the next, and before long, even weekends disappear into work. Love didn't vanish, but intimacy eroded under the constant strain of time stolen by the machine. Their personalities added another layer of friction. Lee, raised with traditional values, wanted consistency and quiet, family dinners, shared evenings, the kind of stability he had dreamed of since childhood. Farrah, ambitious and independent, thrived on movement, energy, and the thrill of chasing opportunities. She wanted her own spotlight, not just to exist in his. To the outside world, it still looked like balance. The steady anchor and the free spirit. But in private, those differences created tension that no amount of magazine covers could erase. The irony was brutal. The very careers that were supposed to give them a life of comfort and stability were the same careers tearing away the time they needed to protect that life together. By the mid-1970s, cracks had already begun to form, not from a lack of love, but from the relentless pressure of an industry that demands sacrifice. And the sacrifices always seemed to come at home first. In 1976, Farrah Fawcett's life changed forever. She wasn't just cast in a new show, she was cast in the show, one that would redefine television and ignite a cultural wave. Charlie's Angels. The series was glossy, fast-paced, and unapologetically stylish. But it was Farrah who became the lightning rod, the face everyone remembered. With her golden hair, dazzling smile, and easy charisma, she transformed from promising newcomer into an overnight sensation. Almost simultaneously, another moment hit the culture like a meteor. The famous red swimsuit poster. Shot in casual lighting with no elaborate set, it captured Farrah at her most natural, playful, approachable, and impossibly radiant. The image sold over 12 million copies, plastered on bedroom walls, college dorms, and locker rooms across America. It wasn't just a poster, it was a phenomenon. The photograph became one of the most iconic images of the 20th century, the symbol of an era defined by beauty, freedom, and television glamour. But fame on that scale is a double-edged sword. Almost overnight, Farrah was everywhere, on talk shows, in magazines, on billboards, in commercials. Every brand wanted her, every producer wanted to pitch her, and every fan wanted a piece of her attention. For Farrah, it was the career breakthrough she had always dreamed of. For Lee Majors, it was something else entirely. He was already a star in his own right, but now his wife had become something bigger, an icon whose image belonged to the entire world. At home, the shift was seismic. Farrah's schedule filled with shoots, interviews, and branding deals, leaving little room for anything else. Lee, whose work on the $6 Million Man kept him busy enough, suddenly found himself watching their marriage take a backseat to the machine of celebrity. He wanted dinners together, quiet nights, time to simply exist as husband and wife. But Farrah was determined not to be defined by him, or by any man. Her independence mattered as much as her rising fame. That independence, though admirable, only widened the gap between them. The poster and the angel spotlight had given Farrah everything she had worked for. But success always has collateral damage. The very image that made her unforgettable to the world also began to erase the intimacy of her marriage. To millions of fans, she was the perfect fantasy. To Lee, she was becoming harder and harder to reach, and the cracks in their marriage, once subtle, were now impossible to ignore. The unraveling didn't happen in a dramatic explosion. It was quieter than that, almost invisible at first. A dinner missed here, a weekend rescheduled there, and suddenly the moments that once kept them close were reduced to fragments. Lee was filming long hours, sometimes 6 days a week, while Farrah's career pulled her in every direction, photo shoots, endorsements, and endless media requests. Their marriage began to resemble a business arrangement, a logistical puzzle where the pieces no longer fit. Lee, who had built his life around discipline and routine, longed for a sense of normalcy. He asked for small things, dinners together, evenings to reconnect, a chance to pause in the middle of the chaos. But Farrah, fiercely protective of her independence, resisted. She didn't want to be seen as the actress who compromised her career for her husband. She was determined to stand on her own, to prove she was more than just Lee Majors' wife. That determination, while empowering, created an emotional distance that love alone couldn't bridge. Friends who visited them during this period later recalled the contrast between their public image and private reality. On the red carpet, they were radiant, the Hollywood golden couple, smiling effortlessly for the cameras. At home, The tension was harder to ignore. Conversations that once flowed easily became clipped. Laughter, once spontaneous, felt rehearsed. They weren't fighting loudly, they were drifting silently. And sometimes silence is more dangerous than shouting. The cruel irony was that both were working for the same reason: to secure their futures, to build the lives they had always dreamed of. But in chasing those futures, they sacrificed the present. Time together became a luxury they could no longer afford, and the more they tried to protect their careers, the less they seemed able to protect their marriage. Each calendar clash, each missed connection, chipped away at the intimacy that had once been their strongest bond. By the late 1970s, the marriage was already fragile, stretched thin by ambition, distance, and pride. Neither of them wanted to admit it, not to the public, not even to themselves, but those around them could see it clearly. The cracks were no longer just beneath the surface. They were growing wider, and soon, something or someone would break them open completely. In Hollywood, paths crossed constantly, on sets, at parties, through mutual friends. That's how Ryan O'Neal came into the picture. He wasn't a stranger to Lee Majors. He was a peer, another actor who knew what it meant to live under the industry's glare. In fact, at one point, Lee even trusted Ryan enough to socialize with him. But in a marriage already stretched thin, even a familiar face can become a fracture point. Farrah's connection with Ryan was instant and undeniable. He was charming, charismatic, and in many ways, the opposite of Lee. Where Lee was steady and reserved, Ryan was impulsive and playful. To Farrah, who was drowning in the pressures of fame, Ryan offered something intoxicating: lightness. He made her laugh at a time when her life felt consumed by schedules and obligations. And laughter, when everything else feels heavy, is hard to resist. The relationship didn't stay hidden for long. By 1979, photographs of Farrah and Ryan together began appearing in tabloids. They weren't just rumors, they were images of them holding hands, smiling at events, comfortable in each other's company. For Lee, the betrayal was brutal. It wasn't just that his wife was with another man, it was that the man was someone he had once considered a friend. The affair wasn't whispered about in private circles. It was splashed across magazine covers for the entire country to see. For the public, it was delicious scandal. The beloved angel had left her husband for another Hollywood star. The story fed tabloids for months, each new sighting of Farrah and Ryan reigniting the frenzy. But for Lee, it was humiliation played out on the national stage. Friends later said he was blindsided, that he hadn't been given a warning, hadn't been prepared for the tidal wave of headlines. He discovered the betrayal the same way everyone else did, through glossy photographs and sensationalized headlines. The emotional damage was immediate and irreversible. Farrah, determined to move forward, never tried to hide her relationship with Ryan once it was public. Lee, on the other hand, chose silence. No angry interviews, no public accusations, just a withdrawal so complete that it said more than words ever could. And in that silence, one truth became clear: their marriage was over, not with a quiet fade, but with a scandal that left scars impossible to forgive. By 1979, the split between Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett was no longer just speculation. It was reality. They officially separated, and by 1982, the divorce papers were signed. For most Hollywood couples, this would have been the start of a public war, each side battling for sympathy in interviews and magazine spreads. But Lee Majors didn't play that game. Instead, he stepped back, letting silence speak for him. In an industry addicted to gossip, his refusal to feed the fire was both baffling and powerful. Farrah, meanwhile, leaned into her independence. She had left Charlie's Angels after just one season to pursue film roles, fighting to prove she was more than a TV phenomenon. Critics had dismissed her as a poster girl, but she pushed for challenging projects, eventually earning praise for her dramatic performances. The spotlight followed her relentlessly, sometimes for her work, sometimes for her turbulent relationship with Ryan O'Neal. She remained a public figure, messy and magnetic. Lee took the opposite route. After The $6 Million Man, he starred in The Fall Guy, another successful series that kept him on television screens throughout the 1980s. But while his career stayed alive, his personal life became carefully guarded. Friends said he never aired his grievances, never tried to rewrite the narrative, never once lashed out at Farrah or Ryan in public. His silence wasn't weakness, it was armor. It was how he protected what little control he still had over a story that had spun wildly out of his hands. This silence, however, came at a cost. Those close to him noticed a change. He was still charming, still professional, but there was a guardedness that hadn't been there before. The easy confidence of the man who once embodied a cultural icon seemed tempered by loss. He dated, yes, but he never remarried during those years. To many who knew him, it was clear that the wound Farrah left was deeper than he would ever admit. In the end, silence became Lee's legacy in the story of their marriage. Farrah's choices played out in tabloids and headlines. His response was to vanish from the narrative entirely. And that decision left fans and friends alike wondering, was it dignity that kept him quiet, or heartbreak too heavy to put into words? Whatever the answer, his refusal to speak ensured that their story remained unfinished, suspended in the space between scandal and mystery. Time has a way of softening anger, even if it never fully heals the wound. By the early 2000s, decades had passed since Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett had gone their separate ways. Both had changed. Lee was no longer the young action star of the 1970s, but a seasoned actor with a quieter career and a more private life. Farrah, too, had moved into a new phase, focused less on being America's poster girl and more on her art, charity work, and selective acting projects. For the first time in years, the possibility of reconnection didn't feel impossible. According to friends, a mutual acquaintance floated the idea of a private meeting. Just the two of them. No cameras, no press, no headlines. Not a reconciliation in the romantic sense, but a conversation, a chance to clear the air, maybe even laugh at the chaos of their younger selves. For Farrah, the idea reportedly held appeal. She had once loved Lee deeply, and time had blurred the sharp edges of their breakup. Nostalgia has a way of making even the most painful stories feel gentler with age. Lee's response, however, was more complicated. He considered it, even admitted privately, that part of him missed the person she used to be. But hesitation outweighed curiosity. He had spent years building a wall around that chapter of his life, and tearing it down, even for a single afternoon, risked reopening wounds he had worked hard to keep closed. To him, protecting his peace mattered more than revisiting the past, and so, he said no. The decision wasn't made out of anger. It wasn't bitterness, either. It was self-preservation. Lee understood something that few people ever admit. Closure is not always healing. Sometimes it's a gamble. You don't know if the conversation will bring peace or if it will rip open everything you've buried. For Lee, the risk wasn't worth it. Silence, once again, felt safer than words. Not long after, Farrah's health began to decline, and the window for reunion closed forever. Whatever chance there had been for a final conversation, for shared forgiveness, or even a simple goodbye, vanished. To the world, it looked like a missed opportunity, but to Lee, it was a choice to leave the past where it belonged, even if it meant carrying unanswered questions for the rest of his life. In 2006, the world was stunned when news broke that Farrah Fawcett had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer. For fans who still saw her as the glowing, untouchable beauty of the 1970s, it was a jarring reminder of mortality. But Farrah didn't hide. She chose to face her illness with brutal honesty, documenting her journey in a personal video diary that later became the documentary Farrah's Story. Millions tuned in, watching as she revealed not glamour, but raw vulnerability. She became a symbol of courage, showing the world that even icons are human. As the story dominated headlines, many wondered how Lee Majors would respond. After all, despite decades of silence, Farrah had once been the love of his life. Yet he remained publicly absent. No interviews, no appearances, no dramatic gestures of reconciliation. While tributes poured in from colleagues and fans, Lee kept his distance. To some, this looked cold. But those who knew him understood. Grief doesn't always look like tears on television. Sometimes it looks like silence. Privately, friends later revealed Lee was deeply affected by the news. He followed updates quietly, asking those close to him about her condition, but never stepping back into her world. It wasn't indifference, it was self-preservation. For him, reappearing in her story, even as a supporter, would have meant reliving the heartbreak he had carried for decades. And perhaps he knew that Farrah, fiercely independent to the end, wouldn't have wanted him to break the boundaries they had both chosen long ago. When Farrah passed away on June 25, 2009, the world mourned loudly. Candlelight vigils, magazine covers, emotional television specials, all celebrated the life and legacy of the woman who had become an icon. Lee's response was short and restrained. She fought a tremendous battle against a terrible disease. She was an angel on earth. And now she is an angel forever. Just one line, respectful and brief, but heavy with the weight of a man who had already said his goodbye years earlier. He did not attend her funeral. He didn't appear in documentaries revisiting her career or give long interviews about their love. For some, this was disappointing, even confusing, but for Lee, it was consistent. He had chosen long ago to protect their story by not feeding it to the press. His silence in her death was the final echo of that decision, a quiet acknowledgement of a love that had shaped him, a heartbreak he had carried, and a chapter he had chosen never to reopen. Legacies are rarely neat. They don't follow the tidy arcs of movies or the happy endings of fairy tales. Instead, they live in fragments. Photographs, reruns, old interviews, and the stories people continue to tell. For Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett, their legacy as a couple has outlived the marriage itself. Decades later, fans still remember them, not just as individuals, but as part of a glittering pair, Hollywood's golden couple, whose love story shone brightly before it quietly broke apart. Lee's legacy is one of resilience and restraint. As Cullen Steve Austin, he became the face of American strength in the 1970s, embodying the fantasy that a man could be rebuilt stronger than before. Off-screen, he mirrored that same resilience, not by fighting his heartbreak in public, but by choosing silence and dignity. His career continued, steady if not spectacular, and he eventually remarried, finding a quieter kind of happiness. But the shadow of Farrah remained, not in bitterness, but in the unspoken spaces of a man who never forgot his first great love. Farrah's legacy, meanwhile, is one of brilliance and defiance. She was more than a poster, more than a smile. Though often underestimated, she fought for roles that proved her depth as an actress, winning critical acclaim for her dramatic performances. And in her final years, she displayed a rare courage, allowing the world to see her not as a flawless icon, but as a woman battling illness with grace and grit. To millions, she remains a symbol not just of beauty, but of strength. Together, their story is remembered as both inspiring and tragic. They had what so many dream of: fame, love, and youth on their side. Yet even with all of that, their marriage couldn't withstand the relentless pressures of celebrity and ambition. What makes their story compelling isn't just the scandal or the heartbreak, it's the humanity. Two people who loved each other deeply, but discovered that love alone wasn't enough to survive the spotlight. And perhaps that's why their story endures, because it isn't just about fame, or beauty, or even betrayal. It's about the fragile balance between love and ambition, and the choices people make to protect themselves when that balance breaks. Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett never found their way back to each other, but their silence, their resilience, and their impact left behind a legacy that still lingers, reminding us that even in Hollywood, some stories remain unfinished, and maybe that's what makes them unforgettable.